With every star, we are born again. Open your heart, spend less time in your head.
Hi, welcome to Break the Stigma. This is your host, Natalie Bolin. I'm with the Alcohol, Drug Addiction, Mental Health Services Board of Tuscarawas and Carroll County, the ADAMHS Board. So take me to the Indians.
Okay, so 2015, I go to spring training with the Phillies. It doesn't go. They have me change my mechanics. I'm doing different things because at that point, I'm pretty sure they've exhausted pretty much what they thought they could do to help me. So they had me change my mechanics up to something they thought would be easier for me to repeat and not think about. But it turns out they ended up releasing me towards the end of 2015 in March. I go home, my first dinner home. I get a call from a 216 number, and I'm with Krista and her family. Mm-hmm. And I'm laughing. I'm like, what if this is the Indians? And pick up the phone, and it was definitely the Indians. And they kind of played with me a little bit. They're like, hey, we want to see if you're still interested in playing baseball. I'm like, duh. And they're like, okay, well, we just want to kind of ask you a couple questions and see where your mind's at, and then we'll get back to you. 9 or 10 days go by with nothing. And I'm just like, are you serious? And then on that 10th day, they called me and said, hey, we got your flight details. What email can we send them to? And I'm like, what the heck? So I go with them, and they, like, I love the Phillies. They have the Philly way. But it's just different. When I went with the Indians, it was like, I just felt like I could be me, and I didn't have to, walk on the eggshells or do things a certain way. There wasn't one way to do things. I could do whatever, as long as I got to the end goal, they were okay with it. But they really took it easy with me. There was no rush. I didn't throw off a mound right away. It's almost like they knew they might have contacted or had some type of, they were looking at me through my career. They had scouts watching me. And they had a scout tell me that they were interested, but just to stay tuned. And that was in 2013. And I'm like, are they going to pick me up at all? But that's getting too much in the baseball's like roster movement and everything is so out of this world. I don't even want to get into that. But once I got over there and the way they just took it slow with me and they knew what I was capable of, and they knew they had a steal. They just wanted to strategize and figure out the best way to get the best out of me. And it really clicked the way they handled it. And next thing you know, they send me to Lynchburg, Virginia, which is not a place I wanted to go just by the name of it. And it was just a breath of fresh air. I was just, there was no expectation. It was just, hey, we just signed you for paying you basically nothing, basically what you were already making. We really have nothing invested in you, but we still want to help you. And I started pitching okay. I still wasn't where I was in the next year with the Indians, but there were maybe a little bit of moments where I was like, had the doubt crept in, and I was like, oh crap, like, where's this next throw going to go? But for the most part, I was just cruising. And then the spring training of 2016 happened. And that one was that's when the nightmare, I think, began. I was able to stay afloat, and they sent me to Akron. But before all that, I thought I was getting released. I was like, this is my last year. I'm going home. I'm throwing terrible in spring training. I lost it. I'm quick to just say I lost it in baseball. With football, if I threw an interception, I'm like, all right, I figured this out. I'm going to be back. We're going to get this. Baseball, on the other hand, if one thing would happen, I'm like, oh, crap. What's going to happen next now? And but once, I went to Akron, I told myself, this might be my last year. My family's going to be able to come and watch me now. We're 45 minutes from my house. Let's just play baseball. And a couple months later, I was pitching out of my mind. I felt like the best pitcher in the world. My confidence was through the roof. Nobody could hit me in my mind. I was throwing 99 miles per hour. And I just was like, this is nuts. There was a moment where a little bit of doubt crept in during playing catch, but I quickly got over that and continued my hot streak. Went to Columbus. Everything was smooth in Columbus. One thing I did have an issue with in Columbus is when they built that field, they forgot to put in a bullpen. So they kind of last minute stuck a bullpen right on, right, like literally if this is the first baseline, the bullpen's right here. So, yeah, fun times. That didn't really mesh with my mindset well at the time, just because I felt, that was one of my worst fears, is throwing the ball onto the field while people are playing and I'm warming up. Yeah. So I always had to battle with that, but I was still pitching great in Columbus. I got to Columbus July 4th, I think, and pitched well in that game. Then we traded away Ben Heller to the Yankees, and that's how, and a couple other players to the Yankees. That's how we got Andrew Miller. And then I became the closer for Columbus. And the manager at Columbus, Chris Trimmey, it was no longer really development in AAA. Chris Trimmey was trying to win games, and I was pitching well, so he was putting me in any chance he got. And I just was pitching great, and my confidence kept building. And then one day, I didn't think I was going to be pitching. I didn't even have my jersey on. I had my pants on, no cup. Baseball, we wear a cup to protect the family.
Yeah, I know what a cup does.
Okay. But I think that day kind of impacted me because I was not mindset to pitch that day. I kind of went back into my early minor league days where, they kind of baby you, where, okay, you've thrown 2 days in a row. You're not going to throw again. But we had some guys injured in Columbus. Obviously, like I said, Chris Trimmey was trying to ride the hot hand. And, they came back to me and said, hey, Garner. And I laughed like, he's like, no, seriously, get ready. I'm like, oh my gosh. So I run to the locker room. I had to get my jersey on. I didn't even have my belt. I had to get my belt, and I just was not prepared at all. Run out there trying to get help because the pitcher's not doing well. I have to run out there and get ready and just and I'm trying to throw and be ready fast. And I threw a couple balls into the play, which kind of helped the team out. But I go in that game and just bomb it. Like, ultimately, almost I couldn't do any worse than what I did that game, which was not what the Columbus people were used to seeing. So they were like, what is happening? And next thing you know, the doubt is there full bore. And I want to say that was like a week or so, maybe 2 weeks before I got called up. So everything was rolling perfectly. And then when the time comes for me to go, fulfill the beginning of my dream, the wheels start to come off. You say that like that was a defining or changing moment. And that's what I kind of wanted to say earlier when you were talking about basically the perspective and how we look at things. One pitcher might airmail a ball, throw it over a guy's head and not think none of it. Like, oh, what the heck was that? Oh, whatever. Just like I said with football, I throw an interception, whatever. But for me, depending on how it played out, if there was a family that maybe had to avoid the ball, almost hit a child or something, then that's just like, boom, and it's here, it's stuck. And now I'm only thinking about that. So then I'm like, okay, that was a life-changing experience, which should have been something that I just shrugged off and grabbed the ball again and threw it. But that's where, I think stuff like that really made an impact on me when most pitchers and most times with me, it wouldn't, but it did. That makes sense. That makes perfect sense. Yeah. I mean, if we've talked a lot about how your mindset affects your throwing ability, and that was a moment when you were absolutely thrown into something you weren't ready to be thrown into, and then you felt like you weren't successful, that set the stage, and then you moved to, like you said, what your dream was. Yeah. And I did have one or two more outings where I was kind of laboring through. Actually, one outing, this was in Indianapolis. We were playing the Pirates AAA. where I came in, and this, I think this was probably before that bad outing. I come in to this, it was bases loaded, no outs. And the worst thing in baseball to have as a relief pitcher is let other people's runs come in. So that was all on my mind. I'm like, I have to get out of this. Can't let these runners score. I come in, I'm throwing bullets, I'm throwing hard, and I get out of the inning, 3 outs, no runs scored. And at that time, I was just coming in for 1 inning, boom, 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 and the game was over. But that one, I came in the 8th. So I had to go back out for the 9th, and I haven't really been sitting in between innings, like, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I come back out, and granted, I think I was 96, 98, the previous inning. And I come out for this next inning. So all the adrenaline's gone. There's no pressure situation. It's just, you know, get these 3 hitters out, and we're good. After being jacked up for that last inning coming in, I was throwing, I think, I wasn't paying attention, even though I will admit I did like to look at the scoreboard to see how fast I was throwing sometimes. That inning, the first couple pitches of that inning, I'm guessing weren't hard. So it was very apparent to everybody, like, wait, something wrong? He was just throwing 96, 98. What's happening? Now he's throwing 90, 91. So the pitching coach and manager, Chris Trimmy, come out, and they're like, you all right? I'm like, yeah, I think so. And they're like, well, your velocity dropped a lot. Like, you sure you're okay? And since they brought to that my attention, I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. They went back to 96, 98, and got out of the game. We win it. But in my back of my head, I was like, what? Why did that happen? And, you know, and once it gets in the mind, I kind of obsess on those thoughts. I wasn't following the Philippians 4-8.
So you said a few more games in Columbus than you went to the Indians.
Yes. I labored through those games in Columbus. And then when I got called up, because there was a lot of times I didn't think I was getting called up. I couldn't sleep at all. So I'm just this restless person, no sleep, and constantly thinking, okay, I can't go back to what I was. I have to be able to throw the ball hard, and I have to throw strikes. And one trick I used to do was try to throw the ball like over the fence from the foul line. So I would try to just launch it as far as I could, and that would remind me throw the ball hard. You know, so that was one little trick I was trying to do to help me get over my thoughts that I was having. And I was doing that right before I got called up. We were in Durham, North Carolina, just like we were talking about, and that's where I got called up from. And I temporarily forgot about it. Like, oh my gosh, I'm going to Cleveland. And then, of course, when I get to Cleveland, my throwing partner is Andrew Miller. And instantly, one thing I used to think when I was throwing and playing catch with my partners is like, I don't want to hurt him, you know. And this was when this was minor league, my friends. Now I'm playing catch with Andrew Miller. And if I throw the ball and hurt Andrew Miller, everyone in Cleveland is going to hate me. So that was on my mind. And Andrew Miller's not thinking about it. He's like, hey, you know, throw the ball hard. Come on, man. Like, he's trying to help me or whatever. And, you know, I threw one over his head. And I kind of didn't think anything of it. Then a couple of throws later, I threw another one over his head. And then that's when it was pretty much there full bore at that moment. Like, there was only players, though. No fans are in the game or in the stands. It's just me and the players all down the foul line playing catch together, just like we're little leaguers. It's just everyone's 20, 30 years old. And I let a couple throws over Andrew Miller's head, just alarms going off. It was no longer, I'm not throwing the ball exactly where I want. It was, I don't know where this ball's going. Somehow I was able to, and this would happen on occasion, I was able to get through those thoughts and labor through games is what I would call it. And I don't mean to say this to brag on myself, but I pitched okay in the big leagues laboring through. And our minor league pitching coordinator, he texted me after a couple of my outings. He's like, what the hell are you doing? Throw the ball. And in my head is, I know, I'm trying.
Yeah.
But he didn't know what I was going through at the time, because at that point, it wasn't really on his radar. He had seen me pitch for 6 months of flawless baseball, basically. And when I got to the Indians, he's just like, all right, this is what you wanted to do forever. Like, what are you doing? Let it go, throw hard and all that. And even Trevor Bauer is making comments like, man, I thought you threw hard. Like, what happened? And, you know, Trevor Bauer is one of those guys that, you know, he was like, had a smirk. He was being funny, but at the same time, he was probably excited to see me throw hard. So he wanted to see that. And Trevor Bauer was my locker mate, by the way, too. So a lot of that started to, it got ugly. Somehow I was able to labor through the games. If there's another Tito quote that's not in the papers. The bullpen bully game is the game that Carlos Carrasco took the line drive off of the arm. And we had to basically have the whole bullpen kind of fill those 9 innings of that game. So I came in that game in a critical stretch. We're still fighting to be in the playoffs. We're playing the Tigers. They're a couple games behind us. And I come in that game and I just know, I'm like, I am not in the right place mentally. And I am going to have to basically just compete as hard as I can and figure out a way to get through this game. Because we need to win. This isn't like, hey, get your feet wet, Percy. These are games that we have to win to make sure we get to the playoffs. And I think that helped in the end. But it wasn't the pitcher that I wanted Cleveland, Tito, Lindor, all those guys, those teammates to see me as. Mm-hmm. So a lot of that really kind of affected me deeply. But somehow you could tell something wasn't right, but I was still able to get through games and pitch decent in most of those games. But it was something that I was fighting through, and everybody was aware of it. Players, staff, everybody was aware that, okay, Percy's going through something right now. So after we clinched in Detroit, you know, Tito was like, look, I know you had your eyes set on, I never told you the quote, what he said. Sorry. Against Detroit, the bullpen bully game. So I get through one of the ugliest innings possible with no run scoring. I faced Miguel Cabrera, Victor Martinez, all in that inning, and somehow I get out of it. I was throwing the ball like 40 feet against Miguel Cabrera. I think I showed you that clip, Josh. But the ball's like barely making it to the plate. It's like bouncing and stuff. And then they make me intentionally walk Miguel Cabrera. And intentionally walking someone is one of the scariest things a pitcher can do, because you're just and then intentionally walk, you like are just supposed to get it there and throw it away out there. So in my head, I'm like, oh crap, I have to complete this throw. This is going to be bad. And I can actually, after this podcast, show you what they look like, because the Indians sent me all my game film from every pitch. And you might, now that I told you the how I was thinking, you'll be able to go, wow. But I was just like, I can't throw this ball crazy. I have to get this there. So I'm like lollipopping. Looks like I'm playing catch with my son. I'm like, and we get it there and I walk him. I'm like, thank God. And then I face Victor Martinez, and somehow just God was like, all right, we're going to let you strike this guy out. So I strike him out and I go sit on the bench. And I am just so frustrated, so angry at the display I'm putting on. Tito comes to me. He goes, look, did you see what you just did out there? And I'm just looking. I'm not saying anything. I'm just looking at him in his eyes, showing respect and letting him know that I'm pissed off. And he goes, you barely threw any strikes and no runs crossed the plate. You got out of that inning. He's like, you have the potential to be a good pitcher. You just have to believe it. And he's poking me in my chest. Mm-hmm. And you know, by that point, he knew. He was like, he's not going to be on the playoff roster. They were just like, okay. And he said, hey, I'm sending you home. This was after the season. I'm sending you home. Don't pick up a ball until mid-December. Just get away from baseball. Even though they did invite me back for a couple playoff games, and I did make an appearance here and there on behalf of the Indians. But they were just like, you know, just get away from baseball and then come refreshed for spring training next year. So that was that of 2016. Were
you having any fun at the time?
Sort of. I would say the most fun I had in 2016 was in Akron and Columbus. I even had a bet going with my cousin, because we don't make much money in the minor leagues. He would give me $1,000 if I hit 100. I was in Columbus AAA games facing former big league players and, top prospects. And I was just thinking, oh, I got to hit 100 to get this $1,000. And I want to say it was easy. It was just like nobody was hitting me. I was like, this is crazy. Mm-hmm. And then I go to, oh crap, I'm going to Cleveland, fighting for a playoff spot. Mm-hmm. Like I have to do well, expectation drop.
Your demeanor as you're talking through this podcast is really different than it was last time. I mean, it was a couple years back, but it's still pretty raw for you, isn't it?
Yes. And the fact that I spoke with CC this morning.
Yes.
We dug deep into, stuff that we probably won't share on our podcast. Yeah. And I was like, oh yeah, I do remember that. Yeah. Because if you remember last episode, I think I even said, I don't think I had the yips fully, but after talking with CC, I was like, yeah, who am I trying to kid? Like it was full bore, like scary. Like it was points where I was afraid to throw the ball, where I'm like, I'm a professional player. I can't be seen looking like this, Mm-hmm. And definitely that is just something scary. And it's funny, I've lost both my parents. I've gone through a lot of adversity in my life. And here I am afraid to throw a baseball or around other people. And I would think of that myself too at the time. Like, what am I doing? Why am I so afraid of this? Like, how is this causing so much trauma after all this stuff I've been through? Like, it would just, that was another form of frustration.
You were feeling bad about feeling bad. Yeah.
Yes. And then I would pity myself too. Like, oh my gosh, man, I just, can't even throw the way I want to throw. And then when I think about it, like, oh, what? Like, how did I let that happen?
Because that's not really who you are. Yeah. I mean, that's from the brief time that I've known you, that is so far from who you are right now. Yeah.
And that is something Cece brought up. She said, with you being removed from baseball, mm-hmm. seeing life without baseball, mm-hmm. I'd be curious to see you throw a baseball now. And I'm like, well, it is different, but I am throwing with little kids. So I'm not like letting it go, but I'm not afraid of throwing the ball crazy really now. Yeah. So that is some of the throwing on a setting, being a professional. I know these kids still look at me as a professional, and I would not want to throw the ball crazy in front of these kids, but it's just different. I know what life's like without baseball, and I'm not really like, okay, what's going to happen if I make a bad throw? When I make a bad throw, oh, dang it, here, give me the ball back. Let me do it again. And so,
what else do you want to say about your time with the Indians, or what else that experience was like?
I want to point out how great they handled the situation. Mm-hmm. Not a lot of ball clubs would handle it the way they did, even though, and they'd probably admit it, they were not like fully prepared to handle something like this. Mm-hmm. They were kind of probably just as panicked as I was when it was going on. But I do want to point out a couple players that really took it upon themselves to take time out of their routine to, I guess, try to help me in any way they thought they could. And that was, Cody Allen, Andrew Miller, especially Brian Shaw. So Brian Shaw went out his way to be my catch partner. Even after the 2016 season, 2017, he was my catch partner all through spring training. We tried throwing a football together because that was part of his routine. And no matter what, if I'm Brian Shaw, I'm making millions, I'm a professional baseball player, I wouldn't want to continue to play catch with some guy that doesn't know how to figure it out, who's a professional and can't throw the ball to me. And I continue to have to go chase the ball. But he said, no big deal, man. Let's get through this. Let's go. I know I know you're a talented guy, man. We're going to get through this and you're going to be, a great pitcher. So that meant a lot. Obviously CC, her and Brian Miles, they were trying everything possible in their power to help me, and they had to deal with and like helping me, and then also kind kind of only sharing things that they were, because what do you call it? The client privilege thing.
Sure.
I always want to say attorney client, but obviously you're not attorney. But they tried pretty much everything that they knew how to just help me.
Yeah.
And the Indians organization, man, there were some points where I wasn't too happy with them, but obviously no organization is perfect. But they really, I think, handled that. I guess I just appreciate how they handled it, because they could have did a lot of things, and they tried to. It appeared to me they tried to attack it head on. I know behind the scenes they were probably like, "What the heck are we gonna do? We got to get him back to Yeah. And there was a moment where everyone thought I was back. 2017, they sent me to Akron because of the great pitching coach there, Tony Arnold. Mm-hmm. They thought me and him had a good relationship and we could work this out. And he is like an expert at this, as just being a good coach for players and trying to get them through tough situations. And we got to a point where it looked like I was the old Percy. And I want to say it was around summer, June, July. And Tony Arnold didn't really speak up, but deep down, he didn't think I was ready. It's almost like you say, hey, you know what? I'm going to go run for a day or two. I'm in shape. And I stole that analogy from CC, but that's basically what it's like. Obviously, no. A couple outings was not, okay, Percy's cured. Let's send him back up. Let's start him on his train to get back to Cleveland. No. I did well a couple outings in Akron. I came in, closed the game, closed it out. I was throwing. I felt comfortable throwing. I wasn't thinking. It was great. I was like, oh, thank the Lord. And I was so ready to get back. The Indians were so ready for me to get back that they were just like, look, you did well at Akron. Let's get you to Columbus. And the field thing, with me being on the field, I don't think I was ready for that. So right when I got to Columbus first outing, no bueno. And then after that, I stayed in Columbus, and the Indians were just trying to figure out. Like I said, they exhausted everything I think possible, and they even sent me to I don't know what to call her, a holistic therapist or something. And we tried different things, but again, same story. I didn't fully buy in because it was not traditional exercises we were doing, and I'm like, what is happening right now? And I appreciated her. We had a good relationship. She tried everything. And I'm very appreciative of the people that were involved in the process. And I don't regret anything, but I do regret not, when I had a chance to sign with either the Baltimore Orioles or the Pirates. Mm-hmm. I think I do regret not signing with the Pirates, because the Orioles, I don't know if were on board with the mental aspect of baseball. And at that time, I thought, well, maybe if they don't even acknowledge it and I just kind of forget about it, maybe it'll work that way. Mm-hmm. And that was not the case.
So would you say that you went through anxiety? Is that fair?
Yeah.
Would you say that it was a pretty significant level of anxiety?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
I don't want to put words in your mouth.
Yeah.
I hear you, and I'm pretty straightforward, but I say things
you put a bow
gently.
on things?
We'll see. I think so. Do you think it's fair? We're talking about mental coaches. How close is that to therapy?
I would say it is.
I would say it is too.
Yeah.
Talk to me about why you think the term mental coach is used instead of counseling or therapy. Because
therapy has such a negative connotation.
Oh, Percy, this is why we're here.
And, man, we don't want to do therapy. It kind of takes a hit on our ego, I guess. Now, I would say men are probably more equipped to go to marriage counseling or therapy to deal with maybe family and maybe their kids or something like that, other than just, hey, I have a problem and I need to talk to a therapist. That is not Mental coach. Okay. Mental coach.
See, and I think, I don't care what we call it. We can call it mental coach. We can call it therapy. We can call it counseling. But what it comes down to is, everyone has something that they can benefit from talking to a mental coach, therapist, counselor about. And maybe it's the anxiety related to success or achievement or work. Maybe it's a relationship issue. But that's one of the reasons why I feel like having you on this podcast and making sure that people understood your story was so important for me, because whatever we want to call this support that you received some tremendous support listening to the way that you're describing it. And if we can let people know that this is just part of a human condition. I mean, people struggle. Call it mental coach, call it therapy. Just get there. Just get there. One of the first times that you and I talked, you brought up Kevin Love's name.
Yes.
Talk to me about that. Talk to me about why you brought his name up.
So I don't want to put words in Kevin's mouth or anything about that, but from what I went through and then what I watched with him and playing with the Cavs is he was one player with the Timberwolves. And then when he joined the Cavs, he just didn't seem like the same type of player. And then it seemed to progressively get worse. And then he was getting hurt. And injuries have a lot to do with athletes and their confidence level. And then I believe he even came out and was talking about mental health, and I think he still does. And once I heard him say or tweet or whatever he did when I heard about mental health from Kevin Love, it kind of clicked and go, okay, I think that is what I was seeing. Now, it wasn't on the level, well, I can't really say that either. I was about to say it wasn't on the level of my anxiety, but we can't compare. He might have been able to, pull off certain things during his anxiety that I wasn't, but it doesn't mean that mine was worse than his.
Right.
Because I don't even know exactly specific to what his issues were. I just know that he is a proponent of mental health, and he thinks that it should be, I guess, valued over, higher than what it is now. And by everybody. And I did reach out to him, try to get him on our podcast, but I don't even know if it reached him, to be honest. Hopefully one day I would be able to speak to him or someone. And there's probably podcasts and content out there right now where he's shared his story, and I might have to find that. But I know it's very important to him now, and I can kind of piece together certain things and see what he was going through somewhat on a very, I guess, granular level instead of digging into the details. But now that you brought this back up, I definitely think it's something I want to do. I want to get in and look at, and hear his story if he goes into details about it somewhere.
So for you, it was a big deal because it was relatable. I mean, it was somebody who also had an incredible career, incredible success, who also struggled with mental health, anxiety. And it was somebody that could relate to it, that you could relate to, that talked about it.
Yeah, and another big one, huge, because this one I can relate to massively because I feel like it's on my level of anxiety visually. Like, you could see that he was struggling, and he was a first overall draft pick in the NBA named Markelle Fultz. I don't know if you know anything about him, but I had never seen it in basketball. It's been very popular in baseball and golf, but he literally looked like he had the basketball yips where he could not shoot the ball. And actually another player is like that too, but they've both made progress. And they're like, obviously first overall pick. Both of them were first overall picks, I believe, in the draft, different years. And one was Ben Simmons, and he struggled to shoot. He literally wouldn't take a shot other than a layup. But now he's shooting threes and stuff like that. And then Markelle Fultz, at first it was announced as an injury, because that's what organizations want to call it. They can't label it, hey, we're working on his mental health. Mm-hmm. I don't even think that's acceptable by the league. You can't have a guy out of the game because of that. But it might have changed now. But I just know he was going through some real stuff, and it was in the media. It was a lot of people were talking about it. Some people don't accept it as something, and some people really could, put themselves in his shoes and felt sorry for him. But now it looks like he's made pretty much a full recovery. He's playing for the Orlando Magic. He's shooting. He's being the great player that people knew he could be. And it looks like a success story, which obviously I love to hear. And then there's another one, Daniel Bard, who is playing for the Rockies now. And his form of yips was, I guess, very radical, where it was the ball could go anywhere, I guess. And he was a hard thrower, and now he's with the Rockies and he's back, and he was out of the major leagues for 7 years trying to develop and get back and get rid of this the mental health issues with the yips and stuff like that. And it looks like he's made a successful return. And I made a tweet like, wow. Once I saw him and heard his story, I was like, dang, should I try to come back? But I don't think the wife would.
Well, and that's so interesting to me that you say that. I only have a few more questions and then I'll leave you alone. But you talk about success in terms of returning to professional sports.
Yeah.
What if your success is just as important, but a different path? Such as what you're doing here today may not be you on a mound pitching in front of millions of people and being televised, but the fact that you are a star in the county and you are being so impactful to the adults, to the women, to the kid, to all of these people that look up to you by talking about your struggle with anxiety. You're not pitching 99 miles an hour today on a field, but I mean, Perci, I don't know that you can minimize the impact of what you're doing today. So maybe it's not a pitch, but it's still incredibly successful.
Yeah. And that's why I feel even the first day when you were like surprised, but that's why I love to do this type of stuff. And that's why I'm doing my podcast. And that's why I volunteered to do this one, because I knew it was very important to share, and not just for athletes, just for anybody, like you said earlier. And I think it's something that, like, I hope that we are getting better at, just like the social injustices. I hope we'll just continue to get better. And mental health, I think, is now being taken seriously by more people. And eventually, I think we'll be at a spot where it's acceptable and people understand and people are able to, I guess, empathize with it and see how hard it really is. And maybe some people, with me sharing, Kevin Love sharing, and other people with influence sharing, are able to go, maybe if I had Kevin Love in 2011 saying, hey, I struggle with anxiety when I'm playing, it kind of messes with me. Maybe I would have known, like, at that time, like, maybe this is something I should look into. I think maybe I'm struggling with this. But at the time, I'm like, no, that's not a thing. So I think it's very important to share this information, share honestly, share basically almost everything that I can. I think it's just very important. And I think some good things will come out of it. And
I think so too.
Yeah. And I just hope, like, when I spoke at Strasburg, it was on FCA. I told the kids, like, hey, hit me up on Twitter, Instagram, if anything, like, I'll answer. And there was actually been some people who had reached out. So if there's anyone that wants to reach out through social media or whatever, do so. I'm open. Obviously, I'm sharing this. So if I can lend a hand and help at all, I'd love it. So
last question for you before we wrap up. If you can give any message to any kid who has some anxiety that they're struggling with, feelings of depression that they're struggling with, isolation, withdrawn, sad, whatever it is, if you can give a message to our kids that might be watching this podcast, what would you want them to hear?
I would tell them that it is okay nothing is like, it's okay to have those thoughts. We're human. Do not look at it as like like you're a weirdo or something like that to have those thoughts. And if you are having those thoughts, do not mask them, do not hide them, do not be ashamed of them. But it's very important to share those thoughts with someone that you trust. And if it doesn't matter their age, if your friend is someone you trust, if you don't think you can share that with your parents, hopefully you can. But if you don't think you can share it with your parents, share it with anybody. Make sure you know that it is important that you are important, because, obviously going through depression and stuff like that, it's not fun, and it can have a huge impact on your adult life or, your immediate life. If you get to the stage where, you want to hurt yourself, it's not worth it. So it's very important to realize that everybody's important. Just like they say, everybody's vote's important. You are important as a person. You can bring value to this county or to this world, doing tons of things. So if you're not the person you want to be, you can get there. But I think it's important to share and not be ashamed of what thoughts you're having. So,
and everyone's success is defined differently, and sometimes we have to regroup what our idea of our personal success is.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would love to have a 10-year MLB career.
I would have loved that for you. But I have to tell you, I'm not hating the fact that you're sitting here doing the podcast with me.
Well, I did enjoy this. And like I said, hopefully someone, even if it doesn't happen the next week, this video is going to be up on YouTube forever. So yeah. Who knows who is going to help at some point.
And thank you again so much for your willingness to talk about this, for your willingness to talk about your story. And I don't be surprised if I ask you to come back at some point.
It's all good. Hopefully I don't live too far away, and I'll probably be in the studio right after you.
All right, sounds good. All right, thanks, Perci.
Thank you, Natalie.
With every star, we are born again. Open your heart, spend less time in your head.
Thanks for joining us. Tune in for the next episode.